Or Valley.
Now you're on record, so be careful.
Your old son. Oh, never mind.
It's a formal.
Yeah, in the park. Yeah.
Is it a less?
Yes, we had booths out there.
It's supposed to be a little less hot.
Yeah.
We had
Yeah, so it was a little bit,
We
actually,
had
it was
some
it was
sort of-
cloudy for a little bit for a while and it got cool pretty quickly. Now it's coming back to the 90s again.
It was at
I think it was a
11.
break from the heat.
It's rain, so.
We were going to only go between 9 and 10.
Here comes a committee member.
But what kind of boots you selling crafts or what do you do?
No, information.
Are you here to introduce?
Information.
I am, listen to your background and then you need to move on to,
Social
I'm gonna go
services.
join the mayor, community connections at the Cyril Library.
We have 2-in-1. We have 2-in-1 and for 11 counties in our office. So we have.
Hey, Jack. Hey, everybody. Who's saying?
Hey, John.
Yeah.
They're not letting that rat go,
Mustang.
the way that we're not.
Mustang. You get a boost.
Because they don't want, they want to get
Yeah,
money,
yeah.
they got money to spend,
Sorry.
so we're gonna spend it.
Okay.
How are you? So I used to work with both of their better halves every day. And I don't know if you guys knew that,
What's that?
you know, that both of your wives were at PCC. Well, yours is still there.
Yeah, well, John and I talked about that. We meant that, mentioned that, and I think Cindy asked, asked. and
She asked,
about it.
yeah. When I give them a hug, I always just pass it on to their.
And that small world stuff, huh?
Always,
Don't tell them.
never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
So I was a adjunct faculty member. for
I remember.
17 years. Very first lecture class I had was in the old classroom buildings, the short with a auto body and all that.
In those
stuff.
little bit old style chairs.
Yeah, the first thing I went and sat on the desk in front of the classroom and the desk collapsed.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. I popped up and said, "Did I get your attention?"
Yeah.
Everybody's cracking up. So anyhow, that was my first. True story.
That's great.
Now you only need a computer to teach.
No, I did that. And that's when I quit. When I did the online courses, I did TV courses for a number of years. And then I did online, and you don't we meet once in a while on campus. I like to have the interaction in person.
That's interesting. Royal Academy is the biggest school, high school, is that what they're saying? All online? They must not do the national testing, huh?
George, can you hear us okay?
Hi, yes.
Great.
They don't have any place to have it. They got satellite offices on,
Sorry, Ken.
so, but it's kind of good. I'm not a big fan of that national, unless they do it every 3 years or something, not to do it so much that the kids are tortured. Jeez.
Okay, my phone clock, we have a clock on the wall here and it's a
So
couple
slow.
minutes slow. But why don't we go ahead and get started? We've got Michael Herring from Black Hills online, and I think Madison, you're also with Black Hills? And then we have George, but
Madison Robley, can you hear us okay?
Hi, yeah, I can.
Okay, great. Are you with Black Hills?
No, I'm with Invenergy.
Invenergy. Okay, welcome.
Yes. Hi, yeah, thanks.
okay. So I'm gonna do some early business. I'm gonna call to order, okay? We're gonna go through the consent agenda. And then we'll go through some introductions here. So what I'm looking for is a motion to approve the minutes.
So
And also, there's a attachment here talking about some grant that we discussed last meeting.
And Ken, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I don't think that you should do that yet because you don't have a quorum.
Okay,
Oh.
So let's hope that a few more people hop on.
okay. Well, in the meantime, why don't we get folks to introduce themselves? Why don't we start with George Andrews, who's new to the city staff.
Hi, everyone.
There he is.
I'm George Andrews. I'm new here. My apologies for not coming in person today. I just wrapping up an exit training in my previous position, but I promise next week I'm all yours. And so I'm super excited to join the team to really serve the Pueblo community. And I'm looking forward to having some great relationships with everyone and really making some great progress in the energy goals that the city has set.
We know it's a little bit backwards, Laura, but why don't you introduce George, what his job is?
Thank you. Good. So Laura Solano, I'm the mayor's chief of staff and welcome, George. And I'm looking forward to, George was kind enough to join us today just to be introduced and to listen in, but he doesn't start work until Monday. So his first day is the 7th and goes through the employee orientations and, when we sat together about an opportunity for a part-time employee, we really talked about someone who had organizational skills, maybe some project management skills, maybe somebody who could serve as a good liaison, some research for grants, communication out, and when you needed it back and forth from the committee and from the mayor's office and working with Public Works. And so we found we only have, he's only got part-time work from now to the end of the year, but he does and is approved for 1,300 hours. So since we're halfway through the year, that doesn't mean our hours are cut. He can still work 1,300 hours. And he comes to then the city with interest in a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in IT with a focus on cybersecurity, but also with an interest in, here she comes, with an interest in really the energy field. And we interviewed 3 candidates and he rose to the top, was interviewed by Andrew Hayes, the Director of Public Works, who will serve as his first line supervisor, but he'll coordinate with all of you, with me and and then directly with the mayor. We have all his technology ready. I have folders and folders of information for him to start reading. He'll meet with Luann Martinez, our grant writer. We've got grants coming around the corner that you have suggested that she hasn't covered and that we know he will look towards immediately. So I think we found a really great liaison that we were looking for, not energy expert, but a business liaison. So welcome, George, and we're happy to get this part-time gig going.
Welcome,
Thank
George.
you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Or should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, before we do anything, Alyssa, do we have a quorum? What is a quorum for us?
A quorum is 6. So
6.
you have Ellen, Ken, Edgy, John, and Steve. So only 5.
Still working on it.
Okay.
Take
So,
it now.
And
Sorry, I'm late. Could you brought somebody?
So I'm trying to think here. Our first presentation is going to be from Black Hills, but before we get going there, why don't we go around with the commission table here and introduce ourselves? John, you want to go?
Sure, happy to go. John V. Hill, Black Hills Energy Community Affairs Manager, been with the company for about 5 years, and I'm a member of this committee.
Edgy Walrath, I've been on this committee for a little more than a year. I'm a retired Excel employee. And I guess that's good for me.
Steve Naraki, I've been on the committee since its inception, almost 2 years, getting closer.
I'm Ken Dante. I'm also been on the commission since its inception. So we're going. It's about 2 years. I think it's a little over 2 years. So
Yeah, I said a year, sorry.
And we just recently had an election for this commission, and I got chosen as chair. Laura Getz was vice chair, and I don't know if she's going to show up today or not. But happy to be here. We're doing some interesting work. So you want to go ahead, Tom?
Sure. I'm Tom Corlett and I'm a guest, but I'm also working with Alan and Laura on the policy committee.
And he already knows you. I'm Alan Ward. I'm on the Energy Advisory Commission, and my day job is I work for the Board of Waterworks, Water Resources Manager.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's go ahead and start the Black Hills part of this. Why don't we have the folks online introduce themselves from Black Hills. Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, hi. My name is Mike Harrington. I'm the Director of Regulatory for Black Hills. John and I are excited to share with you our clean energy plan. So thanks for giving us this opportunity. We're looking forward to a good conversation with you all.
Hey, I'm
Julie.
Julie.
Okay.
This is Julie Rodriguez. I'm the Community Affairs Manager. I'm a John's counterpart, and I'll be listening here. Thank you.
And then Madison, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name's Madison Robley. I am with Invenergy. I'm just became the lead developer on a project that we have in sort of the development stages in Pueblo County. It's a utility scale solar project. And so I'm just here to kind of learn more about what's going on in the county and what kind of energy issues you all are thinking about.
Can you leave your contact information with Alyssa, or do you have that already?
I don't have that. If you would be willing to leave it in the chat, Madison, I can grab it from there.
Yeah, sure, not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing, Madison, this is a city commission. We're not the county, okay? But we're trying to coordinate with the county. And I saw that Laura Getz just showed up. Laura, why don't you introduce yourself? We went around the table introducing the commission members.
Sorry for being late. I had a meeting run over. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Getz. I currently work for Tri-State Generation and Transmission. And I've worked a couple different energy related roles throughout the community of Pueblo and Southern Colorado. So happy to be a part of this commission and meet some new faces.
Thanks, Laura. And with Laura being here, now we have a quorum, okay? So we can handle some business that was at the top of the agenda, the consent agenda, basically to approve the minutes. And there's an attachment talking about a grant that we discussed. So if I can have a motion to approve both those. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
I got my script here.
So I just want to make sure it was Edgy and Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Everybody that approves say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody not approve, say no. Okay, it was a unanimous vote. Okay, thank you. And sorry for the confusion there a little bit. So let's go ahead and get into the Black Hill presentation.
Awesome. So I'm going to have Alyssa driving for me. I was about ready. Looks like we're on the last slide here. There we go. I was planning to drive from my iPad, but I couldn't get it working very quickly. So we're going to depend on Alyssa. So as you know, you have two other people here, Mike Harrington. Mike's the Director of Regulatory for the state of Colorado. Kind of the way we've prepared this presentation is I am a generalist. I know a little bit about a lot of different subject matter, and so I will be giving the bulk of the presentation today. Mike Harrington has all the nuts and bolts. He knows all the ins and outs. He's responsible for filing these with the PUC, and so he's my bench. He's the guy that we'll go to if we have questions that I can't answer. And then Julie's here to just be part of the conversation, and if she's got anything she would like to add, she's welcome to jump in here. So I want to start by saying thank you for the opportunity. I know last month there was question about whether we should have the energy attorney for the city come out and give you an update. And I just volunteered and said, hey, I'm happy to do it for you. This thing is rolling, right? The clean energy plan has been has reached a unilateral settlement, or not unilateral, a unanimous settlement. And so happy to give you our perspective. And then if you'd like more, you can certainly ask. So that's what we're here to do today. If we can go next slide. Alyssa. I gave her a PDF, so it's hard to drive these things. Page 2. So really what I wanted to start with is just kind of a reminder. So what is the Clean Energy Plan? Why does it exist? So as you all know, there was legislation that was passed that said, the state had set some goals to reach 80% carbon emission reductions based on the 2005 levels by 2030. And there were two different options. Either a utility could file a voluntary plan, or they could be subjected to the Air Quality Control Commission, and the Air Quality Control Commission would kind of tell you how you're going to reach that plan or that goal. And so we opted to do a voluntary plan. We announced that with the governor in 2021, January 2021, we announced that we would do that. And then we filed the Clean Energy Plan in May 27th of 2022. And the whole purpose of this is to reach that 80% emissions reduction by 2030, and to do it with really three things in mind. And that is, I have them listed as safety, reliability, and affordability. But as you all know, we're all sensitive to the cost of electricity and how that's impacting our customers. And so I would reverse that over. And I would tell you that affordability is first and foremost in our mind. And then safety and reliability are obviously paramount to what our customers expect from us and what we are committed to. So we've developed this plan with those things in mind. Next slide, please. Sorry, Alyssa, I'll give you a PowerPoint next time. So I mentioned that the unanimous settlement agreement was reached, and that was in early 2023. And what that means, and the reason I have this slide set up the way I do, is take a look at that blue box. So there's a lot of people that intervene in this process. The Board of County Commissioners intervened, Energy Outreach Colorado, the Colorado Energy Office, Canyon City intervened, Colorado Public Utilities Commission trial staff, a number of different consumer advocate, utility consumer advocate. All of these people have standing. They have unique standing, they have a voice, and they want to be able to contribute or have their opinion heard on how this plan gets developed. And so the reason it's really important to just identify that we have a unanimous settlement agreement is that means that all parties agreed. There was a negotiation that went on. We had presented something one way. There were some things that were questioned that were negotiated down or up, whichever you want to think of them. And ultimately, everybody's desires were satisfied through this process. And so that's really important. Next slide, please. So here's what was proposed, and here's what the unanimous settlement agreement included. I've really listed 4 key components of what that was. Initially, we said we were going to get 450 megawatts of new renewables on our system, that we were going to reach a 90% reduction in carbon emissions, that we were going to reduce renewable, or we're going to increase our renewable generation to 79%. And that we were going to increase our planning reserve margin, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to 24%. And then you see on the right-hand side, I hate to read to you, but 400 megawatts is what we settled on. 80% is carbon emissions reduction, 70% in terms of renewable resources generation, and a 20% planning reserve margin. There's a couple of key things I'd like to focus here on. And the first one is the new renewable resources. So when we modeled this, what we learned through that modeling process is the most efficient way, or the way that we could get the best result. And Mike, you might have to jump in if I'm paraphrasing too much, but the way we could get like the optimum result is by going to 90% carbon emissions reduction. And what we heard from interveners is, hey, you're going an extra 10%, and that just means more money. It means more money on customers that they have to pay for these renewable resources. And so we prefer that you don't go that extra mile. And so ultimately that was negotiated down from 90% to 80%. The other really important part is this planning reserve margin. So planning reserve margin, that's to make sure everybody has adequate resources on the system, right? So that we can plan for those 105 degree days when they occur, so that we have adequate capacity to serve our customers. You may have seen this group in particular, NERC recently published a report, and they said there's a whole bunch of people out there, like 1/3 of the country or something, I can't remember what it was, that are subject to maybe having capacity issues due to extreme heat and extreme weather conditions. And so, it was really important for us. We were at a 15% margin reserve going into this planning process, and we had proposed an increase to 24%. again, as you can understand, that means that there's an additional build there, there's additional capital, there's additional cost associated with that. And so as part of that negotiation agreement, this negotiated agreement, we settled on a 20%. So I think what I would say here is both sides realize that reliability is really important and that planning reserve is really important. And so all parties agreed to up that from 15 to 20%. Any questions about that before I go on?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So on the new renewable resources, how do you factor in like renewable resources that customers put online?
Yeah.
You know, like solar and hydro and things like that,
Yep.
that they may do behind the meter.
Yep, that's a great question. I'm gonna kick that right over to Mike, and that's why he's on the phone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So when we do these plannings, we're looking at really a long-term view. Our planning analysis covers 50 years. Now we focus the planning though on the next 10 to 15 years is really our focus. And when we're looking at our needs of our customers, one of the things that we factor into is increasing adoption of behind the meter solar. And so we've seen a trend recently over the last several years of customers interconnecting their systems on their homes. And so we do an analysis to plan that out to say, okay, how much more behind the meter solar is coming? And that factors into the level of resources that we're looking at.
I have a question, John.
Go ahead.
My question is, it would be really good to see a graph and to understand how this all comes about in terms of timing. Can you give us an indication of that in terms of when 400 megawatts of renewables comes? I think I know the question
Yeah.
answer in a way, but
Yeah, so we're gonna get to that. I've got a very simple rudimentary outline, but I'll share that with you in a couple of slides, if that's
Thank you.
okay. I think maybe to put some context to Alan's question, Mike, Alan works for the water board and they do have a hydro project that I think they're considering one of their storage facilities. Is that right, Alan?
It's at our treatment plant and it's gonna be online soon.
Okay, I thought maybe you were talking about the reservoir that you have somewhere else that you're going through a process on.
No, we break head coming out of Pueblo Dam at our treatment plant. So
Right.
we've got a hydro facility being put in there.
Okay, great. So I think because they're a larger volume customer and they can make some, they can generate some more energy. I think that maybe it was the crux of your question. Is that right, Alan?
Well, I was interested in both, anything sort of behind the meter that's being done by the customer rather than the utility.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say that, that factors in. At the heart of resource planning, it is planning the needs of our customers. That's the whole heart of it. And so what we look at is what we analyze, what are the future needs of our customers? How much energy do they need? How much capacity do we need to have available to serve them? So the customer usage is really the heart of resource planning. That's really the driver of how much resources we need. Then from there, we look at, well, what are the best resources to serve those customer needs? And now we have state policy goals of decarbonization. So now we're taking that next level to say, okay, we've already analyzed our customer needs. Now let's look at the resources that we're going to use to make them to serve those customers. And then I did want to underscore with John that planning reserve margin, because this is a very critical, it's a very critical component as all the utilities across the country are starting to decarbonize our electric grid. The planning reserve margin is incredibly important, and you cannot decarbonize the grid without having adequate capacity to back it up and support it. And we're seeing across the country issues in California, issues down in the SPP down in Texas, MISO, which runs the Midwest area. They've all experienced and have warnings for their utilities to make sure you've got enough generation capacity to serve, because as we start to introduce more and more intermediate renewable energy, having that planning reserve margin to be able to serve your customers is incredibly important. Now, for us in Colorado, and especially for for Black Hills, we are incredibly lucky because we've got one of the best capacity resources in the state sitting right there in your backyard at our natural gas Pueblo Airport generating station. And without that facility, we could not achieve these decarbonization goals. So our backbone of our facility is right there in your backyard. And it is the jewel of our system that allows us to implement and decarbonize our grid.
I had a question, kind of building on Alan. Are you making more energy than you need?
No,
No.
no, we'll still have to buy some power.
Now, that's a pass through Black Hills distribution. You're not bringing it right into your plant or into your there.
It's essentially behind the meter, so it's located at the plant where we have huge energy demands. So it'll save us kilowatt hours. It'll also shave our peak demand.
And then anything excess goes on to Black Hills like a solar.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't think it can go out to the grid. That's my understanding.
thank you.
So John, I might have been sleeping or something, but so what's the geographical area that we're talking about for this plan?
Yeah, so, we can get to that in just a second,
Okay,
Steve, if you
all
don't
right.
mind.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We certainly want to hit on that. I just wanted to mention, as you're talking about that grid, and I had mentioned the North American Reliability Assessment that came out in June. 2/3 of North America is subject to shortages, and they specifically called out 7 areas: US West, SPP, MISO, ERCOT, CERC Central, New England, and Ontario. They could all face shortages of supply with higher demand levels. So significant concerns.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially, sorry, John, we haven't experienced quite yet the heat the summer. Thankfully we've had somewhat of a cool summer, but man, the Midwest and East Coast this summer has been brutal. And there's been a lot of utilities really struggling to keep up. So we're fortunate. We're in a very good place with our system here in Colorado.
Okay, let's hit the next slide. So this kind of speaks a little bit to, I think, the question that you had, Tom, which was, just these key milestones. So I'm really happy to tell you that we're here 2 days after we filed our RFP. So this is kind of hot off the presses. 2 days ago, we issued the RFP for 400 megawatts of renewable energy and 50 megawatts of battery storage, up to that amount. And so the next step is, of course, we'll get respondents, and we will have bids that are due October 20th of this year. And then that evaluation process commences, and that's a 120-day process. And I'll maybe let Mike chime in if that's, a hard and fast rule, but the next 100, after the bid closes, there's 120 days to evaluate that. Now, we don't evaluate that on our own. And in fact, the PUC doesn't evaluate that on their own. We hire a third-party consultant who works for both parties. And the name of them is on a different slide. So let me just take a look at my note. I think it's Axion. Is that how you pronounce it, Mike?
Yep, that's right.
Axion, which I have some of their credentials on a different page, but Axion actually works on behalf of the PUC and on behalf of Black Hills Energy to say, look, here, we're going to give you some critical feedback on this process, on the RFPs, on the submissions, and some practical advice on what we think makes the most sense. And then, Mike, do you want to elaborate any more about what that might look like? Are there 2 or 3 or 5 different, top, how are those fleshed out?
Oh, you're talking with Axion? How that works?
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I'm going to save that for a second. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
All right. So that takes 120 days, and I guess I did have a question for you. Is there any wiggle room in there? Does that go longer by chance? I think I heard you say there might be an extension.
Yeah, by commission rule, we have 120 days. What we're anticipating is a fairly robust response from developers. And so I'm expecting we'll receive in the hundreds of proposals, which is going to be very difficult for us to evaluate in 4 months. So, we haven't made any requests yet, but it's likely we'll need some more time to evaluate these bids. Our counterparts over at XL Energy have been going through their process as well. They received almost 1,000 bids in their RFP. I don't think we're going to get that many, but we should get several hundred proposals, which also demonstrates this is a very robust process, very highly competitive process. We're going to get a lot of developers that have a lot of interest. And it does take our team quite a bit of work to process that. But based on commission rules, we have 4 months to do it. We're likely going to need a little bit longer. But right now, that's the plan.
Yep. So if we,
Let me ask
Go ahead.
a question, because I think it was with the EV plan that was approved a couple of years ago, right? You had this solar farm out on Highway 50. Is that, are you gonna still build that?
so,
Is that gonna be?
yeah, so let me speak to that. That was called our Renewable Advantage. And that we brought that forward. That was so out of our traditional resource or our regular resource planning process, because we saw bids coming in for Excel's bids. We said, gosh, we think we can actually save customers money. Can we get permission to build up to 200 megawatts? The commission agreed with that. They said, yes. We went ahead and did that bidding process, selected a developer. We engaged that developer, and then COVID hit and supply chains went crazy. And the next thing you know, I'll just say that they were struggling to meet the bid that they had entered. And so as a result, actually, we couldn't get any of the developers that could meet the bid that they entered. And so as a result, because we couldn't save customers money with that process, we chose to, at least for the time being, terminate that. But that load was always considered, was always kind of part of this bigger process. It was just out of cycle. Is that the right way to characterize that, Mike?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it was a disappointment. The project was really the bottom floor of the renewable prices that we've seen. Unfortunately, it turned out to be too good to be true. The economics with supply chain issues, there was investigation on solar panels that really halted a lot. And that really frustrated the development of that project so much that it wasn't going to be cost effective anymore.
I saw something pop up from Laura. Laura, do you have a question?
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't have to be answered now. I had just been curious whether or not the original budget that was developed for this project took into account the investment tax credit and then the high potential for other bonus tax credits, given that Pueblo's the likelihood that we'd qualify as a energy community, disproportionately impacted community, all of those other layered bonus credits that could go into these assets.
Yeah, I can jump in right there, Laura. Short answer is yes. The long answer is, yeah, we're requiring the developers when they give us the proposals to demonstrate how they are utilizing those tax credits. And so as we evaluate the bids, that's going to be one of the things we look for, is to make sure and evaluate whether or not the developers are taking advantage of those tax credits.
I have a question for Mike.
Go ahead.
Mike, I'm just curious about, to follow with Laura's question, are there any issues now with land use codes or anything like that? I mean, are you able to, do you still have the property for the 400 megawatts? Or?
So I can answer that. The property was never ours. The developer was the one driving that project.
It's available.
Yeah, and they had the option that was supposed to be on Walker Ranch. And so if you know Mr. Walker, you know he's open for business most of the time if it meets his needs. So I would say it's still available.
Okay. And no other issues that would be standing in the way?
No, we were actually in really great shape, but we were a long way down that road, weren't we, Mike?
We were a long way down the road. That's why it was a bit frustrating when that project failed. Yeah.
That's good news. All right, thank you.
Yeah. So then just to speak to the rest of, assuming, Tom, that we meet the 120 days and that we get, a decision in April of 2024, then we'll just say sometime in 2024, 2025, construction would commence, and they have to be in service. That's the key. These things have to be in service by 2029. Because we have to meet that 2030 goal.
How much of PAGS would still be operating at that time? Let's say.
A lot less, certainly. So from an energy standpoint, the energy out of PAGS will be a lot less. But that goes back to where you have to have that capacity.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you all remember, I think it was December, this past December, we actually hit a winter peak. Try to remember the exact date. But it was super cold, really cold, and we actually hit a peak in December. We had 5% of our energy was driven by wind production. So I meant on that day, 95% of the power that was providing service to Pueblo was from PAGS. So from an overall annual perspective, yeah, the energy from PAGS will be much less. But on those days where you have to have the capacity, that's where PAGS comes into play.
And can you, so you can effectively turn it on and off or up and down as you need it during those times.
That's one of the beauties of PAGS is it is a highly responsive unit.
So is there a decommissioning time for PAGS?
I don't think so, Mike.
So it's currently under contract through 2031. We'll have to address, after 2031, we'll have to address the future of it at that time.
Great.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Is that the jargon for your natural gas plant?
PAGS.
PAGS.
Yes,
Okay.
Pueblo Airport Generating Station.
What's
Sorry.
what's the capacity megawatt?
440.
440?
I think so.
Thank you. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we get to the next slide?
I don't know, I might ask one of yours.
I got some questions. but Move on with yours. You can
Okay.
answer them already.
All right, so, I wanted to spend just a few minutes on this RFP process and evaluation. I mentioned the Axion Group. I've left the link here so you can take a look at who they are. But just to give you some perspective of who they are, the third-party evaluator, they have 40 years of experience. They've evaluated energy supplies in 25 states and 3 countries. They've participated in more than 100 competitive solicitations in the past 14 years. So these guys have seen a little bit. They're who we've contracted to help evaluate this. And when we talk about the evaluation process, you have the evaluation metrics right here. 75% of the evaluation is going to be based on economics. The cost of bringing those assets onto our system. The other 25% is what we would call maybe non-economic factors, right? And local community support I have highlighted for a reason. It's the reason that we're here talking to you today. It's the reason that interveners intervene. It's the one place you can have a voice when you intervene and when the city intervenes as they're going to. They're already a party to this, okay? We have a best value metric, so that's 5%. The best value metric, which is a labor and a jobs metric, that's 5%. Transmission access, so access to our system and the cost to plug into our system is 5%. A developer construction and operating experience is 5%, and the final is real property and environmental considerations. So things that are concerns to communities where these things are going to be built. But the reason I wanted to really hone in on this is because that 5% is really important. And I think about, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide now. This is kind of what I wanted to leave you with. We're committed to doing 4 specific things. We're committed to a solicitation process that is competitive, that's fully transparent, that we have a third-party evaluator for. We're committed to bringing local economic development in close proximity, because that's to plug into our system, and so to our service territory. We're looking for geographic diversity, so we don't want to put things PAGS 1 and 2 right next to each other. There's some benefits to having things in different places. And then we believe that there's some value in utility ownership as well. 50% of the assets can be owned by the utility. And so we are going to bid for this process as well. And we think there's some advantages to that. And the one that really leaps to mind for me, I don't remember if it was in this room that Councilman Atencio had brought up the solar garden on the east side, and he was a little frustrated. It had been in some disrepair. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of load loss. There hasn't been any degradation of load because of it. But It's a difference between us operating it and a third party who doesn't have any PUC oversight, who doesn't really have any connection or responsibility to it. And I think that to me is one of the driving factors behind why I would say I see value in there being some utility ownership. But there's others. Beyond that, it's the PUSC oversight, like I mentioned, and then just having, the same operator. I mean, if we're the operator, we're here as your local utility company. So those are just some of the things I wanted to leave you with in terms of what we're committed to doing. But my question, and the reason for this kind of silly little word cloud here is, here's the question to the city and what you guys can really impact is what's important to Pueblo. Do you want one of these to be in the city so that you're getting sales and use tax, so that you're, that sort of thing? Is it in the county? So we make sure we're generating property tax for essential services. What is it that will drive the city's desire to support a project? Because it's not going to be just one big 400 megawatt thing. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 of them. I don't know, Mike, am I overselling that? It's probably 4 of them or so.
Yeah, no, we are not interested in one project. So we're interested in probably 3 to 5 projects. One project is not, we're not going to solicit a 400 megawatt solar farm. That doesn't help us at all. So yeah, there'll be 3 to 5 projects that likely to come about of this.
So,
Go ahead.
tell me to shut up, but I just wondered about microgrids, for instance.
Sure.
Microgrids and also RTOs, or in connection to regional transportation or transmission authorities, or something like that. That must be in the thinking at some point.
Yeah, boy, Mike, I'm sure glad you're here.
So on the RTOs, so there is state statute that requires us to investigate and study potential markets. We did join a market this year, back in April. It's a real-time market with SPP.
Yeah.
So Xcel Energy, Black Hills, Colorado Springs Utility. I might be missing 1 or 2 others. So we did join a market, so we're making steps towards that. And then we're looking at investigating what kind of more of a regional market looks like. That's a real tough nut to crack. It's not an easy task to go through, but all the utilities are committed to exploring options. As far as how this plan would fit in, we are when we run our resource models, we will run some scenarios assuming that there is a regional market where we're able to sell our excess energy into. And we're going to model some of the economics and some of the benefits of a potential market. But right now there's no market, but that is something we're studying.
I get back to John's solicitation of having some of these projects within the city of Pueblo. Are you talking about small battery generating stations, small solar, small wind within the city? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I mean, for the cost competitive side, obviously economics play into it, and economies of scale play into it. So we're looking more at the larger projects, but we are certainly excited and hope that developers give us all shapes and forms of projects. We're not limiting, projects on any size. So we really want to study that from the developers and give us, all kinds of projects that we can study and analyze. What are the best options?
Yeah, because you kind of threw me off. You said you don't want anything as big as 400 megawatts. So you kind of threw me off. So you don't want anything that big, but you don't want you're not going to do a small battery, let's call it a substation type deal in the middle of Pueblo somewhere.
If a developer bids that, we will study it. Certainly. We're not going to prohibit it.
And I misunderstood him. I thought you said you wanted to get away from them being owned by a separate party like these solar gardens, that you want to own these things. So you're throwing me off when you said, somebody has a project. Wouldn't it be a Black Hills project?
So maybe I can clarify for you, Edgy. So by state statute, we can own up to 50% of the 400 megawatts. So we will bid into this process. And I think Mike could speak a little bit to what that, how we bid into this process for utility ownership. So we will be part of that competitive process. But I think Mike's point is, if a developer is going to bring forward a project, we're going to evaluate it. And it's still going to be evaluated on the same metrics that
Okay,
you've seen.
I get it. It's kind of like some of those big solar, some of the big wind generating that Excel's hooked up to. They're just part owners of those. And so I get it. I think Mike and John, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have, one of the key objectives is diversity. We're not going to put all our eggs in one basket with a solar farm, right? We took some lessons learned from the very large solar farm that wasn't successful, right? So we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket. So that's why we're not looking for one 400 megawatt project. We won't accept that. So we want some more diversity. We want some diversity in resource. We want wind, solar, battery, all shapes and sizes and all locations. That's what we want to study.
I think Steve maybe had.
Well, and again, this is kind of a bigger question. I asked the geographical area that we're looking at for this, with that proposed plant. What is the geographical area? Are we working in a vacuum and just our area of the state, or is it being coordinated with other energy providers? And I'm asking that because, especially with Alan here, the reality of what's happening with the Colorado River and California, Arizona, Nevada agreed to cut 13% of their usage of the Colorado River. Water and energy, to me, are all tied together where population moves. We do projections of what the growth is for energy usage in our part of the state, or whatever we're talking about here.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, certainly. We're focused on our system and our customers there in Southern Colorado. So that's what we're focused on and what we plan, because we're required to serve our customer needs. As far as geographic, vast majority of the projects will all be located in Colorado. Vast majority of them will be located in Southern Colorado. It's up to the developers when they bid us a project. They have to indicate how they're going to deliver their energy to us. So there could, I'm expecting bids all over the state, but they're going to have to figure out and inform us of how they're going to wheel the power through whatever systems they have. So I do expect though a lot of them are going to be down in Southern Colorado.
Will we be able to see what your bids are?
Yeah, so talk a little bit about the transparency of this.
Well, all the bids themselves are highly confidential, right? We can't share any bids with the other bidders. Obviously, you're giving competitive advantage. So all the bids themselves are highly confidential. That's where we have that independent evaluator that really helps us. And then we do provide public information along the way to inform the commission and the public on the bid proposals that we've received. I'm trying to think of the map. I don't think the map is highly confidential. So once we get the bids, I think we'll be able to share kind of a location of where all the bids proposals are. But some of the specifics on each individual bid remains highly confidential until the very end of the process.
So this wheeling of the power is just going to be between utilities. I hear the hints of deregulation of electricity in Colorado. Is that part of it?
Oh, well, if a bid, yeah, they would have to develop. Yeah, I mean, between the utilities is how you wheel the power through. So if, let's say, you had a project way northern Colorado up in Sterling, they would have to wheel through Tri-State or Xcel Energy to bring it all the way down to Colorado, to Pueblo. So you have to figure out a wheel between all the utilities. If you're not building a project there in Pueblo and interconnecting right into our transmission system, the developers have to inform us of how they're going to get their energy to our customers.
I think we'd be interested in, the earliest views of these things as possible. So just to be informed.
Yeah, I certainly would love to keep you informed. I think, what I want to leave you with is this group has, and why I wanted to be here before you to meet with the city, when you give your presentation. I would say that one recommendation, and maybe I'll get rocks thrown at me from regulatory because they don't want to encourage interveners, but you guys already are. Advocate for your community, advocate for projects that are going to be located where you want them in Pueblo. I mean, this is going to be your opportunity to influence where those projects go. And so that's really the crux of this presentation today is you do have influence. This should be based on your priorities.
So last thing for me is that when we put this committee together, I was the one that asked John. The mayor thought it was very important to have Black Hills be a part of this committee. And I think this is a good indication today with the information that we're getting that we have that kind of connectivity with our major utility provider. So I appreciate, John, you coordinated that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for letting us do it.
Sorry, Madam.
Well, and I have a question initially, and then I got to jump to the grant update date for you, and then I got to exit to meet the mayor at 5 p.m. But where in the process there does the advocacy occur with respect to projects within the city when we're a little bit flying blind with respect to what the RFPs might contain and their location and breakdowns?
Yep. Mike, you want to handle that?
Yeah, sure. So once we get the projects, we'll start evaluating those projects. That's that 4-month time period. Right or after that 4-month time period is when we start to really socialize the plan with the local advocates. So the city, the county, all our intervener groups. That's when we start to share the results of our analysis, and we start to narrow in on the preferred projects that we would then ultimately recommend to the commission. The parties in the city of Pueblo is a party. Once we make our final recommendation to the Public Utility Commission, the parties have a chance to provide comments and let their position be known to the commission, whether or not they support it or want to change or want to see something different. There's a part of the process where your voices can be heard in the PUC process.
And I would say maybe, Laura, one of the things I would suggest is that the city start thinking today. Like what are the and I know there's to me it's fairly, I don't want to say simple, but if I were the city, I'd want it in the city boundaries. Because I'd want the sales use tax, I'd want the use tax, I'd want property tax, I'd want all that stuff. I'd want as much of it as I could get. So
thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
and then I'm going to exit here real quick. But the answer to the grant update that I'm going to talk about with Georgia on Monday is this will go before City Council on August the 28th. And it looks like the grant says we're going to RFP for a consultant. This is a personal service consulting agreement. If there's any of the commission that would like to help us write, because George will be there writing with me, the scope of work. I think Luann has kind of set it out here almost. But the minute this passes City Council, we will issue the RFP for this EV readiness plan consultant. And we have $50,000 to do that. So I wanted to get the date out there for you.
Thanks.
Date 28. All right, I'm gonna run.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
can I touch with you on that for just 1 second?
Oh, yes.
Excuse me. So thank you, Mike, for being here. I think
I have something I can ask more about you later, and I can get an answer.
okay, I'm gonna grab Laura on a separate matter real quick.
Thank you.
And I just had a few questions as well.
I'm happy to stay on. Yeah, if you guys have some questions.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
I think you're okay with it.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, sure. Do you expect there to be a ceiling on the percentage of energy that customers will ultimately be permitted to interconnect locally? Once you've kind of maxed out renewable resources, very likely here at utility scale?
Oh, you're talking about like for behind the meter maxing out? No. I mean, customers will always have that option. I don't see that option ever going away. If a customer makes the personal choice of installing solar behind the meter, they're always going to have that option. I think though, as you get more and more adoption of that, We're gonna have to start talking about economics of how that works. But I don't ever see the state of Colorado ever taking away a customer's choice in installing behind the meter.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I could see the compensation rate changing, certainly. Okay, have you already selected kind of the main financing body for these projects?
It'll be a mixture. So we're gonna, get developers. That's one of the criteria we want to see from the developers. There's with those tax changes with the IRA and the IIJA tax changes, it opened up some different tax treatments. And so we're excited to see some of the creative solutions that these developers are going to propose that we have not had that ability to fully take advantage of some of those tax savings in the past. So we're excited to see what they're come up with. And then we're interested also in different contract structures. So like I mentioned earlier, it's all one of the key is diversity. So we want to see proposals for PPA agreements, purchase power agreements. We also want to see proposals for build transfer where developer builds it and then we buy it. So we're excited to see all shapes and sizes of those contracts.
Okay, thank you. And I was just curious to what extent you're looking at programs that like virtual power plant, encourage virtual power plants, folks adopting batteries, being able to send resources back to the grid, water heater programs, anything else that would promote demand response to basically add very cheap resilience to the grid.
Yes, it's more of a separate analysis that we're doing. Part of our DSM agreements, we're looking at additional DSM proposals. One of the things I know that we're kind of really interested is looking at the potential EV adoption and what are the potential there for vehicle to grid options. Still pretty early and still pretty mature. That's got to really mature before we're able to rely on that type of a resource. But those are certainly futuristic type of proposals that we're looking for. The DG proposals, those are really focused on our RES plan, our Renewable Energy Standard Plan, which is a little separate from this resource plan.
Okay, so we might see some of those programs in the next DSM plan.
The next DSM plan, certainly.
Okay.
And then even potentially our future resource plans, kind of the one the next one after this resource plan.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Laura asked my question. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Black Hills, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you all.
And you're, I was going to say, you're of course welcome to stay on, but here we go. So the next part of our agenda is an update on energy-related state bills. Laura, do you have anything you want to present there? Okay, great. Thank you.
Guess so.
Thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, I'll try and keep this very quick because there are a lot of bills, but I'll blast through it. If you could do next slide, please, Alyssa. So here are just kind of the top bills that came out of this last session. And we'll start at the top. If you can move to the next slide, Alyssa. So tax policy that advances decarbonization. This is where the state has basically allowed folks to claim up to $5,000 for a new EV purchase or lease. That's up to $8,000 for heavy duty trucks. Up to $3,000 for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are in there. $500 rebate for e-bikes starting the spring of next year. That can be point of sale. And then tax credits for large scale geothermal exploration, and then large industrial polluters are being required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they are being offered some nice tax credits when they implement some different measures that significantly reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And so I've just kind of get overview impact to Pueblo there. You can imagine what the natural impact would be for Puebloans with the passing of this bill. Do next slide. Clean energy plans. So this is basically what we just heard from Black Hills. They were required to show how they're going to reduce their emissions by 80% by 2030 with a clean energy plan. And so this kind of touches on that and sets a little bit more of a stringent, it sets a reduction for 2027 as a checkpoint, and some other processes to make sure utilities are on track. So when Black Hills says, you know, this is what we're going to do and here's how we propose to do it, basically the state's going to check in and make sure they're on track with that plan. We'll do next slide.
Laura, is that the bill that also expands the clean energy plan to kind of all energy providers? And that's okay if you don't know.
Do you mean to gas utilities as well?
I just thought there was something that required like the municipal utilities then to file a clean energy plan and all that fun stuff.
There was, I'm not positive that this is the one, it might have been, but yes, like Tri-State is certainly filing their own clean energy plan. So there's a lot of oversight for utilities that were not traditionally regulated. So I believe it might be in that bill. It's a good question, John. Greenhouse gas emission reduction measures. This is the one that updates greenhouse gas target. So initially it said the state of Colorado must meet 2000, be at 90% of the 2005 levels. And they've recently upped that to 100% below 2005 levels for greenhouse gas emissions, and then laid out some other interim targets. Added wastewater thermal energy to be considered a clean heat resource. It prohibits any HOAs from basically prohibiting heat pumps on a residential property, so they're not allowed to ban heat pumps. There's a 30% tax credit for electric lawn-powered equipment like lawnmowers, leaf blowers, all of those kinds of appliances. And then it also requires utilities to provide quote unquote timely service to customers who are looking to interconnect distributed generation. So in many cases, this would be a solar project. They shouldn't have to wait an unreasonable amount of time to do so. And the PUC is still determining what an unreasonable amount of time would be. Okay, we can do next slide. Utility regulation. This is where the state, was receiving huge numbers of bill complaints from folks. We saw the huge spike, especially with gas prices over the winter. And they did some investigating, and this bill was kind of their response. The state trying to show that they were making an effort to prevent bills from getting that high again. And so what they've attempted to regulate here is some different pieces of gas and electric utilities, ending incentives for connecting new properties to the gas system and prohibiting fees for disconnection, disallowing utilities from using ratepayer money for gas promotion campaigns, strengthening long-term gas planning requirements, and then for gas and electric, restricting a lot of recoverable costs. So, they're not allowed to go back and charge ratepayers for lobbying expenses, for a lot of, or, for 100% of a lot of board of director expenses, those kinds of things, as part of this bill. We'll do the next slide. Advancing the use of clean hydrogen. This basically just establishes that hydrogen is a thing, and it really tries to promote what we call clean hydrogen over hydrogen that can be produced from less clean sources. There's an official PUC rulemaking process now for hydrogen projects, so they would be regulated. And then there's a new tax credit for end uses where they expect hydrogen to become an important resource. We can do next slide. Labor requirements for the energy sector. This is basically who would be building these big projects. So Black Hills has proposed 400 megawatts of solar. Essentially, the state is requiring that these projects are built by employees earning a prevailing wage. And in many cases, there need to be a certain number of apprentices involved in the project, or a general project labor agreement needs to be used. And so, you know, we see a lot of unions active in Pueblo. They are likely to benefit from these projects if their unions are tapped locally. But this is also in alignment with the Inflation Reduction Act. So a lot of the federal incentives do require, you know, in order to get these bonus credits on these projects to receive a lot of money off, you already needed to meet these requirements. So the state of Colorado is just kind of jumping on board and reaffirming that. And next slide. Environmental standards for appliances. This is just setting forth some new appliance standards, a little bit more stringent on energy and water. It phases out mercury from light bulbs. So it's basically going to ban the sale of fluorescent bulbs from 2025 onward. And then it's going to reduce allowable nitrogen oxide emissions for natural gas appliances. So that could potentially reduce the number of some appliances and certainly fluorescent bulbs that will be sold in Colorado. But it also has an impact on indoor air quality wherever those appliances are installed. And so next slide. I think this is our last one. Electric vehicle charging and parking. Well, not last slide, but last bill. This was a kind of a loaded one. And it is asking the electrical board to adopt rules for electric ready, solar ready, and EV charging capabilities for multifamily buildings. It's preventing, once again, HOAs or local governments or anyone else from restricting parking and charging of EVs. So you're not allowed to ban EVs from a community or a property. And it specifies that EV charging spaces must count towards parking minimums. So you can't exclude those spaces either. And then it included a new statewide definition of what is a disproportionately impacted community, which is relevant to Pueblo because we are considered one of the top disproportionately impacted communities per the state's definition. And with a lot of new funding programs out there, the state is prioritizing DICs. So that could help us bring in more money. And it means the state will be prioritizing us as a community whenever we're going after money, certainly at the state level. Next slide, Alyssa. This is just a quick screenshot from the disproportionately impacted communities. I can put the link if you want to navigate it on your own, but you'll see Pueblo is considered per the EnviroScreen score percentile there. Pueblo County is #1 in the state for disproportionately impacted communities. We are considered the most impacted community across a number of factors, which include pollution, climate burden, health and social factors, etc. Do the next slide. And here's just a map. This is the new updated definition of disproportionately impacted communities. You'll see, you know, Southern Colorado is really highlighted here as meeting that more than one category criteria for disproportionately impacted. And Pueblo's right there on the map. So I think that is all I have for you. And we can take any questions about these bills, but I think this will be sent out. So you're welcome to look at your leisure as well.
Real good, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you. Any questions?
Good job.
Yeah, good job. Yeah. So I want to go on to the next agenda item because I think what Laura presented here might play into that a little bit too. We're going to be doing a work session on September 5th where the Energy Commission is going to present. I wanted to start the preparation for that. Maybe in our next meeting we could kind of review the presentation and then be ready to do it to give us enough time. When's our next meeting? Is Alyssa online?
I'm here.
Okay.
It's the first Wednesday of every month. So.
It goes after that.
Is it after the session?
That would be on a Monday, I would think.
Here we go. So ours will be September 6th.
Day after. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe that's okay. We'd have, if we had changes, we'd have to react real quick. But it's probably important to do that because it's fresh. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we'll have our commission meeting and then the
No, our commission meeting is
No.
the day after the city council.
Maybe we should put that commission meeting out then. So-
Are you saying change the commission meeting
Yeah. Is that
or
possible?
change the work session meeting if you don't feel like you have time?
No, so change the work session meeting.
Is that easy to do?
Well, I can tell you when the next available one is, just one second.
2024.
Is that easy to do?
So while we're waiting for Alyssa to tell us, I know there's a couple things that I want to include in this presentation. We need to figure out who's going to kind of do the straw man presentation for this. I guess, you know, the other thing that we can do is handle this through email and just, you know, if we can't change the work session date, but I wanted to clarify a position on nuclear generation. Our position, and I think it's going to be, is that we don't feel that it's necessary. It's going to be too late, too expensive. And it's just not right for the Pueblo community. And we've seen that in a couple presentations. One was with the Idaho National Lab, where the director there gave us the information that is, you know, very experimental still, and it's going to be experimental probably through the 2040s, which is just too late for reacting to the climate issue. The other thing is that we saw that presentation from Newt, I think is the guy's name, where he kind of proposed, you know, how renewables can solve the problem. So I think that's kind of the direction we want to go. There is this Excel committee that's really pushing nuclear hard. I mean, it's really pushing nuclear. I mean, they have, and if you look into their slides, you know, they're playing the property tax basis, and it's gigantic. But it's, you know, we're talking about you know, $1 billion facility being built, billions of dollars of facility that would generate, you know, close to $100 million in property taxes. But all the problems that go along with nuclear, I think, would really make it not right for the Pueblo community. I mean, this is why we're a disproportionately disadvantaged community, because we've been taken advantage of. And I think Excel wants to take advantage of us again, because they can make a lot of money, you know, building a nuclear facility. I mean,
And that is the county's committee. The county's coordinated that, right? I mean, they're the ones that came up with the membership. They recruited all the people, right?
I don't know if it was Excel.
I almost thought it was Excel.
I think it's Excel.
Yeah, but I think the county is the one that kind of,
Well, the county started.
because they're the ones that are being impacted. They're looking at a way to increase their tax base. And so I'm just saying, nobody on that committee that we looked at has any energy background.
Yes, and I mean, we even asked to participate, and we're told no.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's being driven by an agenda.
Yeah.
And maybe with our new commissioner, Danae, that could be a little advantageous to us, but, and.
Well, that timing issue is important to county finances too. Yeah, it would be huge tax base, but if it doesn't get built until 2040 or 2050. I mean, is that worth it to put something off that long to?
Well, again, they agreed, isn't it, till 2040, isn't that what they agreed?
Yeah, it's not even gonna be usable until then.
Yeah, but I mean, also, Excel agreed to continue paying that tax.
Yeah.
So the county isn't gonna suffer.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So they're not.
Not
yeah,
until
the delay-
2030. I think that's when they scale down Comanche 3.
Yeah, but I think it goes all the way to 2040, if I remember right.
I
don't know,
think you're right.
Cameron?
I
Huh?
think you're right.
So, you know, my perspective is that this, you know, nuclear generation system is a boondoggle, right? I mean, it may never even happen. Simply because renewable energies are going to come online. We're going to have battery storage that's going to resolve the dispatchable energy issue. It just, and it's going to be, at a tenth the cost. I don't think this is necessarily a Black Hills issue per se, because they're not pursuing this. But Excel wants to put it in our backyard and then ship all the energy somewhere else. So we get all the nuclear waste. We get some jobs, but it's just not. It's not a good thing for us.
Can I make a suggestion along those lines?
Yes.
That what the commission might do is just look at some straw dog proposals for making that, to make that presentation. That could include just reasonable and a reasonable approach. And say that, I just had spent the morning with the Colorado Renewable Energy Policy Committee on this. And that's what we're doing. We're spending the next week reviewing this because we've had people who are really pro-nuclear, but they all also understand that this SMR process is going to be it's unknown. It's experimental. Nobody knows exactly when it will be able to be used. And there are some flaws in the thinking of the committee. So we want to just bring those flaws out and say you hadn't thought about some of this stuff. And that won't be for this committee, but I think to say that maybe you don't talk about closing the 93 nuclear plants that are out there running now, and include the new Vogtle plants that produce something like 94% of the or 94 reactors that provide like 18% of the power in the country. So what you want to do is just say we don't want to stop building renewables by interfering with this. It's a distractive issue. And if we can just say, look, it's distractive, it doesn't make sense. And I think draw up some things that people can agree on and say, yeah, that's the kind of thing we should present to them. So they understand that everybody understands both sides. They understand the problems with SMRs now, and the fact that it's just going to be hugely expensive. I can't find anybody yet that has said it won't be.
So are you proposing that we don't do anything on this yet until
no, I think
we get more information?
I think gather as much information as possible and then do some drafts that this committee can look at and say, I like that idea. I don't like, just.
So how do we do this? I mean, in a time, were there some other dates available, Alyssa?
Yes, actually, you could have the September 18th date. It's actually a Tuesday because of a holiday, but Tuesday, September 18th.
That'd be better.
Yeah, let's do that. So that gives us time to kind of put together a presentation, review it in our next commission meeting. And
That makes your presentation due September 14th, just so you know.
Thank you. Good.
So how do we get this draft proposal? Should we have the policy committee work on it?
Sure, that's a possibility. That's not up to me. I mean, that's up to you, but I think it's possible to gather some really good valid information that's being developed now by people in various organizations in the state, 50.org. Some of it's environmental, for sure. But Colorado Renewable Energy is not struggling with the environmental side of it, it's all the technical side of it and the cost.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe that's, that might be.
And we now have two PUC ex-commissioners on the, and one of them is still thinking about nuclear. And he said that we had the same kind of conversation today, and it ran for two and a half hours because there was such a spirited conversation about it. So.
And there's some other things that this Excel committee had proposed, right? They want to inject hydrogen into their gas lines, okay? To me, doesn't sound like a good idea, because what they're trying to do is extend their natural gas line life. That's
not going to fly.
You don't think that's an issue? Okay.
No, because they're struggling to keep the gas lines currently solid.
Okay.
And to try and mix hydrogen with gas and do that and I mean, we can read a lot more information about hydrogen, whether it's green or blue or whatever it is.
So what's the possibility like for this work session that since you have this body that's already kind of working on this,
Yeah.
and that I don't know if you would say the verdict is still out, but you want it to be a kind of a rational type of
I think
plan. So I just wondered if that would just be part of the presentation saying that we're waiting for the outcome of this here, but we as a group, and I think probably most of us are, that's not a priority for us. We want to pursue, that's what we are all about. The thing was by 2035 to be 100 renewable for our community and not to have anyone else selling it out of our community.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen. I think just to add to that, I think the council really needs to solidify and shore up that resolution because it's just a resolution. Right. It's not an ordinance or a code.
No, it's strictly a kind of a goal.
Yeah. Where would you go to stiffen that resolution into something?
Well, Alyssa, I mean, actually, an ordinance it's like it becomes a law. I mean, that's the closest thing to a law is an ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really, there's no steps to that from resolution.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, the resolution is your goal. It's gonna take ordinances to get there. I mean, you can't make an ordinance that says the community will be 100%.
That's
You know,
You're absolutely right. That's exactly how.
No new buildings will be allowed to be built and connected to gas. You know, things like that. They get you steps toward
But
that.
maybe a part of what we do is piece of this is going to be.
There comes the hook.
Those steps.
No, just the first thing you would do is socialize it with the mayor. And then if he agrees with you, he would put it to their law department to draft an ordinance or resolution.
Okay. But there's steps and I agree. Yeah, that's great thought.
And I think, you know, in this presentation that we give to the work session, you know, we need to put some of the accomplishments of the commission too, right? So we need to, you know, figure out where those things are. I like this presentation that Laura just gave because it kind of shows what the future is bringing, right? But we need to be, the problem is that there's a lot of people tend to look back, you know, utility companies tend to be backward looking. You know, what did I do in the past? How do I, you know, increase in the future? And I think in all this new technology is coming out, we need to be more forward looking because it's going to change the way we use energy. I mean, even Mike Harrington mentioned vehicle to grid, right? I've got this, I just bought an EV. It's got an 80 kilowatt hour battery on it. If I could share that with the grid, you know, maybe we wouldn't need as much generation resource.
Does anybody have any idea of kind of the politics of the current city council? Do you think they're still generally supportive of the ordinance that was adopted by a prior council?
I would say the majority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe not all, but generally, yeah. I think that's great. I think we also should talk about energy efficiency as part of it. We've been talking about that here in terms of, you know, insulated Pueblo, that kind of thing. We lower the load is going to be a major issue in terms of, you know, I think back to the original municipalization graph that Black Hills put together showing John that the curve showing the cost going out over time.
Mm-hmm.
And showing a peak at some point and then a stabilization. If that's still a possibility, that's really a good curve to support this, what I would consider a real contemporary plan. We're in a way, we're very lucky to have this going on here now. And if we can continue to build on that and do more DSM kind of stuff and just show that it's all working for us here. And we don't want to have radioactivity stored for 4,000 years within 3 miles of people. You just don't do that. It's not sensible. And I think we can probably make the key. I'm just, you know, a lot of people today in the morning were very, very emotional about it.
Yeah, Excel sent that fly in here.
It's a robo-fly, right? Say your time is up, get out of here.
For your presentation, I just, would suggest that, at some point that you have to touch on, the fact that this process is occurring, energy resource planning is occurring for us currently, that you want to be highly engaged, that you want to make sure that your community priorities.
That's right, yeah, I think that absolutely. That's the replacement for whatever it is, we're
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
we want to be positive, not so much negative.
I mean, I have to tell you, so if you've been to Colorado Springs, you've seen all the natural gas generations they just built. I looked at their stories. It's the same story here 10 years ago, literally. They're talking about the responsiveness of those units. They're talking about, how they're reducing emissions with that plant, with those natural gas plants. It's the exact same story from 2010 here. And when I was at CML, I spoke with a lady from Fort Collins, and I told her that we had no coal on our system. And she was like, that would be fantastic. We're still 51% coal or something. I mean, I feel like we're ahead of the curve here. I know where the pain points are. I live here. I understand that. I feel like we're so far ahead of the curve here. And we are on the cusp of that really reaching some energy goals and priorities that this community has, even despite, how painful it has been.
Well, I just, I mean, the benefits of having PAGs is clear, right? The pain that it costs because it doubled the cost of energy for everybody. So, we've got it. So, let's use it.
Take full advantage of it now. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, there's your. Go ahead.
I just thought maybe you were adjourning, so I wanted you to officially say it.
Well, okay, we do need to.
We've lost 2 people.
Adjourn and then talk or.
And then, yeah.
Okay, so unless there's anything else, I say we adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
Anybody's on there?
no one's on there. No one's on.
Before I forget, one more thing, our ride and drive event that is this Saturday. If anybody's interested, if you want the link to sign up to drive an electric car, I can get it to you. It is, they ask that you make reservation because we have 140 scheduled drives already.